Hello, my name is Michael Kotch. I'm a Christian Bible teacher, author, and counselor from the United States. Welcome back to our weekly Bible teaching series. In this video series, I'm going to teach an overview of the Bible starting in the beginning with the book of Revelation, going all the way through it and covering the major events and teachings in basically every book of the Bible all the way through the end of Revelation. You can see all these videos on my Michael Kotch Facebook Holy Bible channel. It's the one with over 50,000 followers on it. And also you can see it on the Michael Kotch YouTube channel. Today we're going to be covering the adult life of Abraham's son Isaac and his son Jacob. So far we covered an overview of what the Bible is and why Jesus is the most important person in the Bible. I went over creation in Genesis, and creation, God created everything, and man and woman with Adam and Eve in the fall. And then we went through the sinful mankind where they got so bad, God had to wipe them out through Noah and the ark and the flood. And then he restored everything with Noah's offspring. And then last session we covered Abraham, and we talked about why Abraham was such an important person. Through trial and error, he built his faith up in God, that God could do anything he promises. And God asked Abraham to do a biggest sacrifice you could ask for. He asked him, would you sacrifice your son for me because I asked you to? And Abraham agreed to. And God didn't let him do it. He was just testing him to see if he would do what he asked him to do. And he passed with flying colors. And God stopped him. And because of that, God said that I'm going to make a great nation out of your descendants. Kings are going to be your descendants and your offspring. And one of the descendants of Abraham, because of this big thing he's willing to do for God, was actually Jesus Christ. So now we're going to pick up with Abraham's son Isaac, and then his later two sons, Esau and Jacob. So again, this is all the material in here is from my book, Bible Summary for Adults and Students. If you would like to get the whole book for yourself, you could purchase it online at most major booksellers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, places like that. And that book is also based on the English Standard Version of the Bible, the ESV. So we're picking up now. We're going to talk about Isaac and Jacob and Esau. So Abraham's son Isaac now is a man, and he married a woman named Rebekah. Now Rebekah was unable to have any children, so Isaac prayed to God that God would grant them children. God answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twin sons. The sons fought with each other inside Rebekah's womb. She could feel them fighting all the time. So she prayed to God and asked, God, why are my two babies fighting inside of me? And God answered her prayer. God spoke to her and said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. God said that to Rebekah, and it was written down in Genesis chapter 5, verses 23. Now at the twins' birth, the first one that she delivered was covered in red hair, and they named him Esau. He was the first son to come out. The second one came out holding Esau's heel. Second son had his arm hanging out, and he's grabbing Esau's heel as Esau came out. That's how much they're fighting, even during delivery. And they named the second one Jacob. Now as they grew up, Esau became an outdoorsman, and he was a skilled hunter, while Jacob was a quiet man who dwelled in tents. Isaac loved Esau because of the food he hunted, but Rebekah loved Jacob. You're going to see this from here on out, especially with this line of the family. They seem to pick favorites. Isaac loved Esau more. Rebekah loved Jacob more. It causes all kinds of problems. You can't love one kid more than the other. This family did. And you're going to start to see it playing out right with this family here, and it goes on with their descendants later. One day, Jacob was cooking stew. Esau came in and he was very hungry, and he asked Jacob for some stew. Jacob said he would give him stew only if Esau gave him his birthright for it. Esau said, well, I'm starving to death. What good is a birthright for me? Sure, if you give me some of that stew, I'll give you my birthright. And therefore, he gave Jacob his birthright in return for some stew. And the Bible said this about that. It said, thus Esau despised his birthright. And that was found in Genesis chapter 25, verses 34. Now, over time, mess up the water here. Over time, Esau and Jacob's father Isaac, he became old and he grew blind with old age. And he believed he's going to die soon. So Isaac called his firstborn son Esau in and told him to go hunt and make a meal out of whatever he caught. And afterward, he would give Esau the blessing due to the firstborn son. Now, Isaac's wife, Rebekah, who is the mother of both Esau and Jacob, heard this. And then she went to Jacob and told Jacob what his father said, that hey, Esau, I want you to go out and hunt for me and make an animal prepared for me. And if you do that, I'll give you my blessing for the firstborn son. So Rebekah, who loved Jacob more than Esau, gave Jacob the following instructions concerning this. She told him to get 2 young goats from their flock. She would make a meal out of them. Jacob would give them to Isaac, and since Isaac was blind, he would think it was Esau that gave him the meal, and Jacob would give the blessing to Isaac instead of Esau. Now, Jacob didn't think that this would work. He said, Mom, Esau, my brother, he's hairy, and I have really smooth skin. As soon as he touches me, he's going to know I'm not Esau, that I'm Isaac. That I'm Jacob. And he said, instead of blessing me, he's going to curse me if he does that, because he knows I'm trying to trick him. The name Jacob in the Bible meant trickster. He did a lot of sneaky things, this Jacob. And a lot of times they gave people names based on their character. Well, his name was Jacob, which meant trickster. So Rebekah said, don't worry about that. Just do what I tell you to do. I'm gonna make this meal. And she dressed Jacob in Esau's clothes, so he smelled like him, and she told him to try to talk like him, and she put animal pelts on Jacob's arms so he felt hairy. So if Isaac touched him, he'd feel hairy. Now, when Jacob brought the food into Isaac and asked for the blessing for the firstborn son, Isaac, who was blind, said, you don't sound like Esau, you sound like Jacob. Let me touch you. And he reached out and he was blind, he touched him, and he felt the hair on his arm because it was animal pelts. And Jacob reassured him, no, it's me, it's Esau. And Isaac said, well, you sound like Jacob, but you smell and you feel like Esau. And I guess it was enough to convince Isaac that this was Esau, but it wasn't. It was Jacob tricking him. So, Isaac gave Jacob the blessing meant for the firstborn son. And this is the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob. He said, may God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. That's found in Genesis chapter 27, verse 26, 29. Now you find that quoted all throughout Christianity, even to today. They say in the Bible, it says, though God will bless those that bless Israel and curse those that curse Israel. This is where it comes from. You'll see soon Jacob's name was turned from Jacob into Israel. And his father gave him the blessing that said, cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. So he got the blessing, and then Jacob left. Soon as Jacob left, Esau came in right after from hunting, like his father asked him to do for him. Now Esau prepared his father a meal and brought it into him and asked for the firstborn blessing. Isaac said, Who are you? I already was given a meal for my son Esau, and I gave him my blessing. Esau said, I'm your son Esau. Jacob tricked me. And Esau cried out in bitter agony for a blessing from his father for the firstborn. Isaac said he made Jacob lord over him, Esau, and he gave him his blessing. And he doesn't have another blessing for Esau. He gave the only one he had for the firstborn son. Esau cried for a blessing from Isaac, and Isaac answered him and said, Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew on heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. And that was given in Genesis chapter 27, verses 39 to 40. Now Esau hated Jacob because he tricked their father into giving the firstborn blessing that belonged to him. Now Esau said that when their father Isaac dies, he's going to kill his brother Jacob for doing this. Now Rebekah found out that Esau said this and had these plans. And so she sent Jacob to save his life away to live with her brother Laban in the land of Haran until hopefully this anger and murdering intentions of Esau towards Jacob passes. That can be found in Genesis chapter 27, verses 30 to 46. Now Esau later married a daughter of Ishmael. Remember, he's the oldest son of Abraham, who he had with Hagar because they didn't think God can make Sarah pregnant at age 90. So she said, hey, have a son with my servant here. So they had a son named Ishmael. And then God came back and said, what are you doing? I told you I'd give you a son. Do you think I can't do it just because she's old? And he gave her a son when she's 90, and that became the heir to the promise, which was Jacob. So Esau later married a daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham and Hagar, who was cast out. God came to Jacob in a dream and told him that he made a promise to his grandfather, Abraham, that his descendants would be many and would form a great nation, starting with Jacob's sons, starting with his sons. Now, he didn't have any sons yet. You know, he's living with his father-in-law. But what happened was Jacob fell in love with this woman named Rachel, and she was the niece of his uncle Laban, or I guess they were cousins. And he asked Laban, "Can I marry your daughter Rachel?" Now Laban was more of a trickster than Jacob was. He was more of a manipulator. He was always messing around with Jacob to manipulate him and gain advantage of him. So Jacob asked Uncle Laban, "Hey, can I marry? I love your daughter Rachel. You know, can I marry her?" And he said, yes, you can, but I'll tell you what, you have to work for me for 7 years first. If you work for me for 7 years, then you could have my daughter Rachel as your wife. And Jacob was happy to do it because he loved her. So he worked for Laban for 7 years. Then on the wedding night, Laban goes in and brings out his other daughter, Leah. Jacob said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, you're going to marry my daughter Leah." He said, "No, we have an agreement. We have an agreement for 7 years. I'm going to marry Rachel." Laban said, "Oh, no, well, no. We have a tradition here that the oldest daughter must get married first. And Leah's the oldest daughter, so she must get married first before Rachel. So if you're going to marry any of my daughters, you're going to marry Leah first. Now, if you still want to marry Rachel, you can. You just have to work another 7 years for me." All right, because he loved Rachel, so he worked another 7 years. So first he married Leah after working 7 years. Then he worked the second 7 years and married her sister Rachel. So he has 2 wives. They're both sisters. You think that might cause some problems? Yeah, some conflict. Okay. Now through the both of them, through Leah and Rachel, Jacob had 12 sons. He had 10 sons first with Leah. Rachel was barren. Rachel wasn't able to have any children. After, you'll see this comes into play later with one of the sons, Joseph, in the next teaching. So after he had set 10 sons with Leah, and Leah used to taunt Rachel they used to taunt each other. Leah would taunt Rachel, "Ha ha, I have 10 sons through my husband, and you have none." And then Rachel would taunt her back, "Yeah, but we both know he loves me, he doesn't love you." So there's all this conflict and animosity within this love triangle. So anyways, Jacob had 10 sons with Leah, and then he had 2 sons with Rachel. And these would go on to form later, very soon, the 12 tribes of Israel. And Israel is a country it still exists today. It's an amazing story. We'll teach you later. It existed after Jesus was crucified. Rome came in a few years later, totally destroyed it, wiped it out for almost 2,000 years. And then one day it reassembled as a country through the United Nations. It's a whole God thing. God set this all up, and there's still a country today. And the country of Israel was formed through these 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. Also, Israel is a country which Jesus would later be born in when he came to earth. And this could be found in Genesis chapters 29 to 31. Now God came to Jacob one night in the form of a man, and Jacob began to wrestle with him, with his God-man. Jacob and God wrestled all night long. When God saw that Jacob would not give up, he touched Jacob's hip socket and caused it to pop out of joint. This caused Jacob to limp for the rest of his life, to remind him of the day he wrestled with God. However, even though his hip was out of joint, he still would not stop wrestling with God until God blessed him. God asked Jacob, "What's your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And then God said to Jacob, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." And that statement was in Genesis, the whole event, Genesis chapter 32, verses 27 to 28. This is where Israel started. God named Jacob Israel, okay? And his sons are going to be the 12 tribes of Israel. Israel was the man, Jacob, but it formed a country from his sons. So this is where the country of Israel began. Jacob became the first person to form the country of Israel, and his 12 sons would go on to form the 12 tribes that would make up Israel. God then finally blessed Jacob as he asked him to. That's found in Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 to 32. God later appeared to Jacob and reaffirmed what he told Jacob on the night they wrestled. God said to him, the second time he told him, your name is Jacob, no longer shall you be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land I give to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. Now it's found in Genesis chapter 35, verse 9 to 12. So that's where we're stopping for today. Next, when we pick up, I'm going to teach about one of Jacob's 12 sons, Joseph. One of my favorite stories in the Bible. In my opinion, one of the most interesting stories of the Bible. I think you're really going to like it. You know, I teach church and Sunday school classes. They all love the story of Joseph. So tune in next week. We'll hear that next. And again, I'm Michael Kotch, and to see all my videos, all my teachings, please go to my Facebook page where I have multiple videos up there. I also have many written teachings about the Bible. Or if you just want to see the videos and not anything else, you go to my YouTube channel. God bless and take care. Bye-bye.